everybody. Welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today we have Chris Edmonds, and we are talking about his book, The Culture Engine, and how, yay! He's
It's
clapping,
okay for us to do that,
yay!
right?
Yes, you can bow.
That's right.
You're
I'll
not going
stay
to
in the
bow?
studio.
Okay.
Don't have to do that much.
So
Too
we
much
were going
work.
to be talking about your book and how, in when you're in an organization, a corporation, however big the size, or even a functional area within a corporation, how you can develop a cultural, uh, organizational culture. And you call it the Constitution, actually, as we're
I
going to
do.
talk
We'll
about.
talk more about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about it now.
Cool.
All right, how do you define, or people call it organizational culture, company culture, work culture. I assume they're all the same thing. How do you see it?
I really do see those as very, very similar. And sometimes leaders feel like culture is very touchy-feely, right? It's not as quote tangible as processes and systems and equipment and floors and doors and all that kind of stuff. The reality is culture is very powerful, and culture is really how people treat each other.
Hmm.
It's the norms around how do we work, how do we solve problems together? What happens when things aren't running perfectly? And too often in organizations, there's not a lot of intent around the culture. The
Hmm.
intention and the focus is all around getting crap done, right? Whatever the
Hmm.
widgets are, getting those built. And the problem is that if your culture doesn't align with people's hearts, people's spirits, people's wishes, people's engagement, you're actually costing yourself a lot of time, a lot of waste, and a lot of money and lousy service at the same time. So, culture, if we look at it as kind of the simple piece, it's how things get done around here and how people treat each other.
Hmm. It's funny because I'm a coach and I primarily coach individuals about achieving their personal best. And in a lot of ways, to me, it seems like this is the if you actually look at an organization as an individual entity, even though it's comprised of lots of different people, it's the
Yep.
same kind of thing. I mean, people talk about personally about living an intentional life and to have a life with meaning. And I think this is the organizational correlate to that, right? I mean,
It
that's,
is.
and it's so important because if you think about yourself and you run around, and I can speak from personal experience, like a chicken with your head cut off, because I
That's right.
spent probably about,
Frantic.
yeah, I mean, I spent probably, gosh, I don't know, like 35 years of my life living that way until I thought, this is actually pure insanity. What is it that I'm trying to accomplish here? Who is it that I really want to be? How do I
Yep.
want to behave? What kind of,
Yep.
because if I have that sense of that, the whole Gandhi thing, where if I actually have a sense of who I am, I can actually create a better world. And I think the same holds true with organizations. Do you think so too? What do you think?
I really do, and the way the book is outlined, basically it starts with the leader's own personal constitution. We'll talk about organizational constitution in a moment, but it gets exactly to what you just described as who am I being as I interact with people? Am I nice? Am I mean? Am I evil? Am I self-centered? Am I working with, cooperating with so that we can actually get stuff done and actually maybe have fun?
Mm-hmm.
And on that scale, what you know as a coach and what you experienced as a living in corporations for a while, and I did as well, is most of the time we're not happy. We're not being our best. We're not being asked to do our best. We're actually sometimes being asked to do quite a bit less than our best because it's really going to be easier for everybody else. It's very frustrating. So if we know that the meaning that our sole focus is in an organization is to help somebody else make money, that doesn't inspire me. That actually depresses me.
Right.
So it's the idea of who are you and what's your own life purpose that gets a little soft and fuzzy too.
Mm-hmm.
And what are your values and what are the behaviors you try and model so that you can live in alignment with your own values? And if you start there, then you can, as an individual, as a human in charge of your own life, take a look to see what's my family like. There might be some things that I'd love to change there. What's my workplace like? What's my
Mm-hmm.
community like? What are my friends like? Because if we compromise our values, that's going to chip away at our core pretty quickly. And so as I embark on the journey with leaders who read the culture engine, I say, you've got to start with who you are. What do you believe? What are you aiming for? What are you trying to accomplish on this planet? And then you can start to look at, so now I'm a leader of a team, I'm a leader of a division. How do I craft a set of guidelines, some rules around how we treat each other? Because the performance results and those expectations aren't going to go away. And that's a good thing, right? But it's how do we craft some rules around actually being civil to each other consistently? How do we craft some rules around cooperation as opposed to competition?
Mm-hmm.
Because if, as a leader, I can set some of those standards up and actually get some agreement from my team, then I'm going to have a much more likely chance of people working nicely together, of sharing information, cooperating, serving, having fun. There's all kinds of benefits.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I work with individuals, we actually, as a coach, I look at your values. I look at what is it that you're trying to achieve here? Like, what is the outcome that you want? And I look at all aspects of it. You know, what is it that you want to accomplish as your legacy? What is it that you want with respect to your day in, day interactions? What is it about what is it that you want in terms of the work that you want to do? And then we look at, so I look at their personality. Then I look at their individual personality. I look at what their wants and needs are. I look at what they understand about what's work. I look at their history and what they know about the environments that they want and what they don't like or
Interesting.
like. And then what's the last part? There's one piece I'm missing. Oh, I look at their strengths. I look at their
Sure.
strengths and weaknesses. And in some ways, again, this is a correlate to that same exact thing because organizationally, you have a whole bunch of people with their own needs and wants, and it's about kind of merging that together, but in a way that you all agree, like these are our common courtesies and ways that we will
Yeah,
actually interact with each other. That's what I'm hearing is the
very
difference
much.
between translating individual needs that all of the people have to a group, and like when we behave. And in fact, one of the things that happens because oftentimes when I'm working with people, they're looking for personal transformation, and
They are.
they have to understand themselves. And I think people are looking more and more towards organizational transformation. Are you finding that too?
Very much, very much. The wonderful thing about it is as people start to look at what do I stand for, right? What am I striving for? What do I want to be known for? Well, the reality is the way you treat people now, there's a reputation, right? You already have a buzz, and that buzz may be great. The buzz may
Right,
be not so great,
right,
right? Well,
right,
Chris is great when things are going well, but under pressure, boy, he's pretty self-centered.
right.
We all behave in ways that we try and get our stuff done, but the reality is we're not completely solitary animals. We interact with humans all the time. And so, how do we get to a stage where people don't have to have their guard up? They don't have to be keeping track of who do I owe? It's all about we're kind of moving down this path together. We want your individual skills, your individual strengths. We want you to question ideas, but don't discount, dismiss, or demean your colleagues or your customers. Imagine
Yeah,
that.
yep.
Imagine that.
Because it's going back to one of the things that at least one of the core concepts in my mind is people are either people focused or they're task focused. And what happens is if you're task focused, sometimes in the interest of getting, that marketing report out or shipping that product, you run over people, right?
Oh, yeah.
So this whole culture engine is about how do you not run over people
Yeah. Yeah.
while
It's
you're
really
trying to
true.
get things done.
It's really true. And the idea of leaders paying more attention to, and it could be engagement surveys that have become much more prevalent over the past 20 years, which
Yes.
is a great thing. But leaders look at, well, our engagement sucks, right? Our
Right.
engagement is 30%,
Right.
and maybe 65% is the quote green,
Right.
and that and higher would be a good thing. Well, leaders don't know how to fix engagement. They've
Right.
never been asked to do that.
Mm.
So leaders will come to me and say, we've got a big problem. People are not behaving well with each other. We've had some issues with, and the classics are always sales versus production. And there's the classic kinds of competing priorities that happen. You talk about silos in organizations. So it's like, okay, let's stop and look to see exactly how your culture operates today. That's very interesting. And then let's take a look and see if we can understand why your engagement is so low, or why your service is so low, why your churn of employees is so high. There's key, again, metrics that leaders look at, but they rarely have any appreciation at all of the quality of interactions in their workplace.
Mm.
And so that's kind of where we start, because the values piece is about treating people with trust, dignity, and respect every interaction, not half of them,
Right.
because it means the other half
Yeah.
suck, right?
Yeah,
So it's
exactly.
every single interaction needs to be civil. I mean, that's maybe a minimum standard. I'd love them to be appreciative and validating, but we can work to that.
Right.
But the idea of investing time and energy in culture is typically not driven by an engagement survey. It's typically driven by money. It's driven
Mm.
by a lack of productivity. It's driven by mistakes and lousy quality of products and services getting released. And so one of the biggest metrics that leaders appreciate is if you have a culture that is, hang with me, purposeful, positive, productive, engagement goes up 40%, service goes up 40%, and results go up 35%. Now, of those three, leaders go, yes, those are very important, but bumping productivity and profits by 35%, oh, that gets their attention. So, right, because they begin to realize we're literally leaving money on the table because it's so hard for people to trust each other. It's cool.
Oh,
It's cool.
yeah, that's interesting. So that's the benefits. That's why you want to do it. I mean, you could
Exactly.
talk about all the theoretical benefits. You get everyone aligned in a group. You have people focused on one thing with the purpose. You get them to work with in a more cordial way. They're like, la 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 la. What are my what's my productivity? What are my profits? And you can actually translate engagement, positive engagement, and all those different things to actually profits, productivity, customer
Results,
support, customer
the
yeah,
service experience,
yeah,
and that all of a sudden, now those things get measured, and of course we know that results and profits get measured
all the
rather
time.
to the
Yes.
nth degree, and with a great deal of emphasis and intensity. And service might, engagement usually periodic, and again, there's not an understanding of what I can do to fix that.
Right.
So the idea of having leaders understand the lever that I'm trying to get them to pay attention to, which is productivity is great, results are great, making money is really good. I don't want you to, kind of go into this thinking you're going to diminish that in any way, because you're not.
Right.
But what you're going to increase is values and the quality of workplace interactions.
Mm.
And if they look at it that way, it's like, well, okay, that makes sense to me, but this is what I'm being measured and monitored and rewarded on. Oh, this will go up 30%, 35%. We've seen it as much as 50%.
Wow.
Oh, now they're interested. Now they're interested. So what happens is that people, if they feel trusted, if they feel validated for their ideas, then they're going to see a problem. And instead of saying, man, someone should fix that, they're just going to fix it. They're
Mm.
just going to fix it. It's that discretionary energy being willingly applied to company challenges, opportunities, customer needs, colleagues' needs, because it's not me working against or me working for me. It's that we're all in this together.
Mm.
And without an overarching purpose that is about improving quality of life, that's an interesting one.
Right.
Um, and again, having an environment where we trust and respect each other consistently, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like common sense in a lot of ways, but it's actually these common courtesies that we have forgotten in the interest of getting the work done. I think oftentimes people, and myself included, I mean, I was probably the main, violator of these things. And over time I've realized that it's super critical and that those kind of things cannot be ignored. All right, so let's say that someone says, "Okay, I want those profits. I want the 35 to
That's right.
potentially 50% increases in profits and productivity." So let's say someone
Sure.
starts it. Who should and I think that there was something that in your book, The Culture Engine, one of the things I really enjoyed is that you say you can start at any point. Like I could actually be
Yeah.
running a group of 5, I could be running a group of 500, I may be the
Yep.
CEO of a corporation. It can start
Yep.
in any of those, at any place, as long as,
Context almost.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I love how you said it just depends. If you actually can set policy and you alone set policy and can, and have a scope of influence within that area, then you can set culture, which I think a lot of people are like, how am I going to be within this large multi whatever bajillion dollar company?
Exactly.
Yeah, and change things. And so you,
And I'm not the CEO. And
right,
boy, that's the CEO's responsibility, but in your own sphere of influence, right?
right,
Span of control is too old school, right?
right,
You can actually change the rules a bit and have people sign up to be a bit more civil. And,
right.
and it has tremendous, tremendous benefits. So the idea really is that you can start wherever you're at. Literally, you could, as a non-formal manager, I have no formal supervisory responsibility. I could even look at that chapter around it starts with you, right? So
Mm-hmm.
who are you as a human? Let's get that clear. And I can just start to align to my purpose and my values and my behaviors and start to serve others well. They may think I'm a little weird,
Right.
right? Because it's not some formal charge that the overall organization is embracing, but I can make a big difference. The leader, though, is the one that's in charge of the culture of their day to day operating team. Now, that can
Mm-hmm.
be, again, huge multinational, 5 person team, division of 300, any size and scope can be tweaked a bit. We're not
Mm-hmm.
doing and the language around culture change is sometimes almost foreboding to consider, right? That's
Right.
pretty complex. Well, I got 300 people or I have 1,800 people or whatever it is. No, no, no. Let's just get a feel for what is the way you'd love people to behave. And sometimes leaders start with, well, these are the problems we keep seeing, right? People are throwing things, they're yelling at each other, they're withholding information, they're poaching sales. Then we can start with proactive rules there. But
Ah,
the idea of let's share information, let's not cuss, right? Let's
right.
not yell and scream. There's some very interesting kinds of rules and behaviors that leaders and teams will come up with. The challenge is the discussion about those behaviors, which is how we're going to almost live the values that you want.
Right.
That's pretty easy to do. Once you come up with a list of 20 or you come up with a list of 12, now how are you going to hold people accountable?
Okay, so I'm
So
sorry, you're saying 12 to
go
20
ahead.
values. Is that what you mean? Like once you come up with a list of 20 or 12 or 3 or whatever values. And so here's the question, because in some ways this can be like a gigantic, like, let's figure
Yeah,
out everything and start
yeah,
over,
yeah.
like the universe was created and let's start all over. Or it could be
It's fixed.
kind of like tweaks around the edges. Like, when I actually look at the fundamental problems that we have, it boils down to 3 problems. We're being a little bit too risk averse, or it could be that we're being more task oriented than relational. So, does it matter where you start? Like, should you do the kind of like, let's create our constitution from day one and like think about everything, no stone unturned, or do you recommend like kind of small tweaks? Like, fundamentally, you just have to stop yelling in the meetings. Um,
Yeah. And some of that, what's really fun, and I'm in the middle of working with an organization now. We're probably 3 months in. It's typically a 2 year process because I'm helping those leaders not only define what kind of culture they want, but then live it so they can align it. And then in a while, we'll look at refining if there's any tweaks. But the idea is that you have to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And in some organizations, there actually are values formalized somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And often someone will bring out this dusty tome
Yeah, it's
and
like,
blow it
yeah,
off and go,
where are my
here's our,
values? Oh yeah, they're here.
exactly.
They're
It's
on the
like, oh my God.
website someplace. I'm not doing anything
Yeah,
with
we
it.
should
Yeah.
do those. Yeah, we
Right.
don't believe in them. We don't live with them. So the idea is, first of all, leaders have to drive it. So it's about, and you mentioned it, it's about if you have the ability to change policies, practices, even incentives, you've got the ability to start to tweak this culture a little bit. And the idea around how many values and how many behaviors, I want you to make it simple. One of my retail clients did 4 values and had 36 behaviors. And I went, I can't remember what I ate yesterday, right?
Right.
So if you want me to remember these 36, but they knew their culture, they knew what they had to shift. They had some real quick wins that were maybe a dozen of those. And once they quashed those behaviors, then people could kind of focus on, it was an extension. Now let's take it from civil to actually being proactively nice and validating others' ideas. It was really cool. But, I was shocked with 36, 38. Why? So with this team, it's an 18-member leadership team, 1,800 people in this division. We started with, let's do rules just for your team, for the leadership team. And then went, oh, we can do that because it's much more of a smaller scale. They knew exactly what were good practices and what were bad practices. And as they started coming back to me, we did a 3-day kickoff, and then they, 2 weeks later, they came back with their first draft. And I got on the phone with them and said, good. Tell me what you're looking for here, because the challenge that we get to, in their case, they had 5 behaviors, and they had 5 values, 3 behaviors each. So it's a 15. And I said, that's great. Tell me what you mean by this, because it seems more attitudinal. He says, yeah, we want people to have kind of a pleasant frame of reference when they come in. I said, that's not measurable.
Right.
I can't see that, and I can't give you feedback on that. And they went, so we have to define what it looks like, what people act like, what they sound like, what they say. So the idea of, number one, it's leaders that have to drive this. Number two, you may have some values in place. Start with those. Let's not kill the sacred cow right out of the gate. But if there's a foundation of sorts, grab that.
Right.
If there's some behaviors that have been discussed but maybe never formally measured, let's grab those. So the idea is, as a consultant, I can't come in and say 3 values, 3 behaviors each. I don't know. This organization has been operating in some ways that you've seen some really dumb stuff. You've seen some really cool stuff. So let's start with you. Right. I have no expectation I don't tell people, well, you must have an honesty value.
Right.
It's not up to me. It's up to them. The reality is they start to get to behaviors. Those are very, very similar across all the clients I've worked with for 25 years.
Okay. What are they? Be kind.
The
the things that you're saying.
It's the idea, which is kind of interesting, is let's get it to, and it's going to sound funny. So let me stop for a second and let's talk about performance expectations. Mm-hmm. Do you all have metrics for performance? And they go, oh my God, we've got it. Yeah. And there's dashboards that get referred to. And if you're in the yellow, well, that gets some attention. Right, you have to get up to 70%. So there's a monitoring function, a clear measuring function, and there's a reinforcement function, right? There's a consequence.
Right.
You get pat on the head if you got green, and you get slapped around if you got red, right? So what I want to do is say, well, good, then you have an established skill set at measuring, monitoring performance metrics. And they go, well, we don't always hold people accountable. I said, good, you're normal. Right. We can fix that, right? So now let's do the same kind of clear expectations in the form of observable, tangible, measurable behaviors. So I say, what I want you to think about is every 6 months, you're going to do a value survey. And it's going to say, let's say if you work for me, lucky you. So you're going to, as my direct report, you're going to vote. You're going to rate me on a 1 through 6 scale. 1 to 3 is the degree of no. 4, 5, 6 is the degree of yes. On do I manage, our relationship? Do I model these behaviors? And so the behaviors have to be very tactical.
Okay.
So the be kind thing is almost too general.
Okay.
So let's talk about, and I'm gonna pull some from some of a
Yeah.
wide range of
Yeah.
different organizations. So one of my retail players was, if I walk within 10 feet of either a customer or a colleague, I look them in the eye and I say hello.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Right.
Now, I may have gotten kicked out of the house because I forgot to put the trash cans out, right? And so
Right.
everybody's mad at me.
Right.
But when I show up at work, the expectation is, if you're within 10 feet, now do we have people with like rulers going, am I 10 feet? Aha, I don't
Right.
have to say hello to you. No. The idea is, look at people. These are people you work with. These are your team members. And so that shifts from being kind, which is a little harder.
Yeah.
Well, that tone was a little bit abrupt, right?
Right.
So, and even to the extent of argue ideas, validate your friends, validate your peers. And it's like, oh, well, your idea was stupid. You're very smart, and it causes people to have to step back and do something that is now okay. And so let me give you a classic one. One of the most frequently reported desirable values is integrity, honesty, integrity. They kind of fit similar terminology. And the behavior that there's two. The behaviors that are very, very common is, I do what I say I will do, or I keep my promises. And I've had some cool things with, I keep my commitments to my commitments. There's some cool stuff there, right? But if we just take the I do what I say I will do, well, if you work for me and every 6 months you're going to give me feedback about whether or not what I promise you I do. Yes or no? 1 to 3 is a degree of no. 4, 5, 6 is the degree of yes. I want 5s and 6s. 5s and 6s is the standard. It's just like you're missing the quality output on widget number 16.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got it. We're going to stop. We're going to coach. We're going to look at that. So if I'm getting feedback that I'm not keeping my promises, that I'm not being honest, that I'm not being pleasant, that I'm not cooperating, then I have to get that feedback. And as you can imagine, we're going into a very, very different avenue with this. Because most leaders, again, have been trained to pay attention to results. So that's what they do. And I'm saying, good. You manage results. Fabulous. That's exactly half the leader's job. The other half is managing relationships. It's managing the human conduct. And yes, no, our society globally is so polarized today. Not that it was terrific 30 years ago, but it's certainly polarized today, that people have a tendency to almost leverage their power in ways that are cutting, dismissive, demeaning. So that's the way I feel good. Now I can go back, and I'm still going to be in trouble for not taking the trash out, but I'll have gotten back at somebody. Well, that doesn't build trust, and it doesn't build respect. So I've gone in a couple of different places. One is I wanted to kind of give you the example of values that I typically see, but also to really get to the behaviors around civility and teamwork have to be as measurable as your performance metrics.
Right. So that if do I say hi when you're in the 10 feet away from me? How do you get the pleasant and cooperative? So how do you, what are some measurable things, behaviors that you would get to those?
It's interesting. I've had some clients say that 50% of the day you have to smile at others. And it's like, how are you going to do that?
Right.
Right? Because you've got, if you think about personalities, you've got, I'm a very interesting beast personality wise because I'm up in front of audiences all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a professional musician on the side.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on stage a lot. I know how to do the performer thing, but my natural recharging most productive piece is introverted and anal.
Okay.
I
Wow.
does anal retentive have a hyphen? Mine does. Anyway, so I'm very routine driven. I'm very quality driven. I'm very structure driven. And you can see it in the book
Right.
because I want to break down these human relationship demands, expectations into tangible, measurable results,
Mm-hmm.
which are behaviors. So what's interesting is that as I look at how to get leaders to be interested in this, to be willing to accept this, to shift from what is smiling and what percentage of time does smiling have to
Right.
do with it,
Right.
to it's the look in the eye. It's that's where that retail client really had it because friends look each other in the eye. People that I don't like or I dismiss, I don't look them in the eye, even when I'm talking to them. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's that kind of interesting, we're all on the same team. We may have different views of how to do X or Y or Z, argue to the death over how, argue to the death over the idea. But once we all agree, we sign up and we go. Now, I
Mm.
don't meetings after the meeting, right? If you have an issue, let's raise it with all of us here because we're all gonna have to go out and interpret this decision or this systems change or this new hire or whatever it is. So the cooperation gets very interesting because in essence what we want to end up doing is just as people are compensated for the results that they are committed to deliver, we want them to then also be compensated for teamwork, civility, being nice,
Right.
right? Co-op.
Right.
So that's a very interesting, rather significant shift for leaders because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I know how to do this. How do we do this?
Right.
So the idea is this every 6 months, twice a year, custom values feedback. This survey is about the behaviors that I'm demonstrating.
Right.
You've set the standard, just like performance standards. You've basically coached. Leaders have to live it, model it. Oh, hey, we could talk about that for a while because leaders have to make that
Mm-hmm.
credible
Mm-hmm.
by living it.
Right.
Otherwise, they're just doing the managing by announcements thing, which never works.
Right.
So they have to gather feedback. And then now, how are we going to incent? Who are we going to promote? If we have a culture of teamwork and honesty and fun, why am I going to promote the person who's seen as negative, demeaning? All of a sudden, you can have some really cool conversations about if this is kind of the tribe we want, and
Mm-hmm.
WD-40
Mm-hmm.
literally uses that tribe language very, very, very heavily, and one of the coolest, absolute coolest companies I've ever worked with, and a very cool company in general. But their tribe is we're all on the island, folks, and you all are going to learn stuff every day. That means we've missed the mark on a marketing campaign, or we've missed the mark with this vendor. And it's like, how do we fix that? Well, I don't want one person in one office or in their car driving away from that service experience that wasn't very good, thinking, well, how are we as WD-40 going to fix this?
Mm-hmm.
We want the whole tribe to be thinking about. Are you
Mm-hmm.
guys seeing this too? Which means talk about cooperation. It's about sharing information. It's one of the cool values they have at WD-40 is about learning moments.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have mistakes. They have learning moments. Now,
Right.
just that language shift
Mm-hmm.
means I should learn from my mistakes, and I'm responsible for making sure no one else makes the same
Mm-hmm.
mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some really interesting, cool demands that come of these values and behaviors.
Okay, so I have a question for you because one of the things that I'm noticing is there's a couple of different trends that are happening. Um, across a bunch of different corporations. One is Millennials, who are really challenging kind of very fundamental workplace concepts like where do I work? Can't I work at home? Why do I have to commute for an hour when I can just Skype you, right?
Can I just do all of my stuff on my phone? Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, so there's that. There's all and technology, which is part of that. And in addition to that, it seems like I'm not sure what's happening, but things are happening at a much rapid pace because of technology and the way that fundamentally business is done is happening differently. It's no longer at retail stores; it's online. There's all these different kinds of shifts that are I think resulting in companies now looking at their own corporate culture and saying, well, now how do I play? Like, how do I fit
Yeah,
in?
I
Because
think you're
my
right.
organization is part of a societal culture of which is shifting. So, what have you seen with respect to, millennials, technology, the amount of risk? Because I think that the previous culture that, that I was raised in was like, do things at 100%. Now, if I look at my son who's a millennial, it's like, 80-20 rule. Why do I have to do things at
Yeah,
100%? And it actually is because technology is changing so quickly. If I do something at 100%, I've missed something entirely that was as critically important. So there's this kind of
yep,
shift in attitude and mentality. How are
there
corporations
is.
dealing with the external environmental changes?
I think it's a challenge for every organization that I see, and I see probably 100 a year. So there's a lot of organizations I get a chance to see. And what's interesting about the generational differences, there are some generally generational differences, but the reality is there's a lot more commonalities. And it's the idea of a baby boomer, that's me, who really saw my role going into a corporation was to be a cog in a wheel, right? I'm going to be told what to do. I'm going to have a very distinct responsibility. Everyone else is going to do theirs. And if I do mine well and they do theirs well, then somewhere down the line, I won't see it, but somewhere down the line, X is going to be done well.
Hmm.
And there was almost a trust of my job, blinders on, is to do my thing. Whatever's in front of me is what I'm going to do. Now, Gen Xers didn't respond well to that. Gen Zs didn't respond to that very well. The idea is, and I think what the millennial generation has done, because they're very much coming into their own. Their age is now causing them to be the new leaders of organizations and the new leaders of teams. And the philosophy of life and of work isn't the same as it was 40 years ago.
Right,
And I think the stakeholders, the senior leaders are often old people like me, right?
right.
And their viewpoint is, well, this is different, this is wrong. And yet, as you say, they're getting punched in the face every day by the speed of retail, the
Right.
speed of the customer demands, the shrinking global economy, which is very interesting. And I think for many years, a lot of organizations didn't know what to do with that. So it was external. We're just going to kind of manage
Right.
as best as we can here. Now, what we're seeing is a lot of those organizations have had to thrive and to move forward. Great example. Had I'm not going to put her on the spot. Wonderful, brilliant speaker that I've known for years. Have a challenging scenario with her credit card company over the last couple of weeks,
Right.
and went onto Twitter because in attempting to get the question resolved by Twitter, the company came back and said, here's our 800 number, please call so we can help you resolve the issue. Well, now this woman is not as old as me, but older. And she's thinking, a millennial would never put up with that. Just deal with the problem in whatever format I'm coming at you with the question. And
Right.
I think it was a mistake. It was a real disappointment. And of course, I start to look at how are companies going to use Twitter and Facebook and Google Plus and LinkedIn to actually see it as an avenue for service. Some pretty cool articles that have just popped up in the last couple of days. But that's one of those demands that if companies, again, see that as external
Right.
and choose not to see it as an opportunity or a threat. It could be both. But customers are going to walk. Customers are not going to stay there. So as we look at the classic problem of how does work get done, where does work get done? Why shouldn't a baby boomer today be able to go see their grandson, granddaughter's soccer game at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday? If they're doing their work the rest of the time and the work is caught up and they're going to be more kind of happy, they're going to feel like, right? They're going to
Right.
feel like, well, good. At least I got some grandpa stuff in. I got some grandma stuff in this week. That's
Mm-hmm.
really cool. They actually may be more present, more nimble, more willing to cooperate when they get to the workplace. So there's some interesting. I almost see it with some conversations I've had with folks my age, almost jealousy. Well, they're really driving those millennials, right? Those Gen Zs, whomever. Other generations are demanding things I wish I had. And it's like, it's all about the organization and their choice to try and be as accommodating as possible,
Okay.
because not only are the customers' needs, demands, wants changing, but boy, our employees' needs, wants, and demands changing as well. And so it's interesting because when I hear organizations talk about diversity, they're typically talking about ethnic kinds of diversity, gender issues, dumb policies that are
Right.
still very, very restrictive, and they're less concerned about generational
Right.
restrictions, stupidity. So it's very interesting. But the cool thing that we found is that as organizations get more intentional about values and behaviors, people start to simply interact more and say, here's this thing I got to do next week. Um, I'm going to be gone for a day. What
Mm-hmm.
I plan to do is X or Y or Z to make sure I don't miss any of my commitments to you guys. What do you see that could be a problem with that? And these leaders come back to me like a week later and go, that conversation would never have happened. There simply would have been stresses on all parties' parts, and none would have been happy. Nobody would have been happy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the idea of we're all in this together. We're all working towards the same end and trying to assist customers and each other in this wonderful success venture. Success is not just about, beating you in a sales goal. It's about working together and having a job next week and having a job in 10 years and having a company that my millennial son might say, hey, Pop, is your company a good place to work? I saw a cool job opportunity there. Now, I've had customers, my clients say to me, three-quarters of the jobs I had, I would never have recommended to my kids to go to work there because it was bad. It was not fun. It was not inspiring. I wasn't
Right.
trusted. It
Right.
was backstabbing. It's like, what if we create organizations that you'd be proud to have your kids go work at?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Interesting. Again, we still get back to it's all about the money, but that's
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. So I hear a couple different things. So, um, if someone actually, so let's actually map it to a real example, or actually some type of an example. Let's
Mm,
say that my value is CJ, like I'm head of an organization, and my value is personal excellence, which I view as doing things at 100%. Why does technology need to exist? We can actually do face to face meetings. Okay, so that's my CJ's value. Not that it is, but let's say that that was my value. Okay, in
right.
comes a millennial who's like, well, I'm not like, I know that those are your cultural values. You can put it on all the posters that you want, but I'm not going to work here, or I'm not interested in that. So, in creating a corporate culture, you have all these diverse groups, each of them that has their own need, their own perspective, their own desire. And if you want it to be a culture in which everyone feels that it's inclusive and they fit in and that's respectful and there's trust
And
built
it's
in
fair.
and it's fair, how do you actually, you have your own leadership values, you have the values of all the different people there. How do you merge all of it together so it's a beautiful tapestry versus a meat grinder? You're like just throw everyone in there
Yeah.
and let's see what comes out.
Well, or it's a merger of unequals because there's the power pieces that come
Right.
into play. which then I'm going to quash yours because it's different than mine. I'm more comfortable with mine. I'm going to retire in 6 years, right? On and on and on.
Right.
And so it's how do you actually craft an environment where people can feel valued and validated? I think that's the core question. And it really means that organizations need to be aware of, how do people feel about working here? How do they feel about their ideas? How do they feel about their bosses? Are they treated with trust, respect, and dignity? Because as you start to craft an organizational culture that is more relational based, and it's not an easy place to live, because accountability still exists. You're still going to have to get your crap done, right, on time and under budget. And now you have to do it while being nice
Friendly
to
and
them.
happy, right?
Exactly. And look people in the eye and that kind of stuff. It's actually a demanding environment, but it reduces stress. It is, we think about how many hours people spend in the workplace or thinking about work. If again, they're off doing work on
Right.
mobile tablets, phones, etc.
Right.
You're still having to interact with people that you either trust or you don't trust, that treat you with respect or not. And so what's really nice about this approach is I've never seen a set of values and behaviors that was seen as unfair or not worthy of pursuit. So in other words, here's this organization, they decide they're going to do 5 values and 3 behaviors each. They start to kind of shift behaviors to get to those desirable kind of treatment, trust, respect, and dignity. What is very interesting is that leaders particularly are going to be put under the microscope, because they're now going to have to live these in every interaction, right? So it's not only am I supposed to drive for production, but now I got to look people in the eye and smile and whatever, right? Right out of the gate, you're going to have some people going, exactly, this is what I've been praying for so long. This totally aligns with my own values and my worldview, and they fit right in. You're also going to have folks on the 180-degree end of that spectrum saying, this is not what I signed up for.
Yeah.
I can go down the street and get the same money, maybe more now because the economy's better.
Right.
And I don't have to deal with looking people in the eye and freaking smiling.
Right.
Right. So they leave. Is that okay?
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Because if you want a tribe that's all going to be hanging together with both performance and values, you're not going to be able to keep everybody. There's going to be a percentage in the middle that are going to be, let's see how this plays out.
Yeah, I'll say yes, but I'm really saying no on the inside.
Yeah. But all of a sudden, it's easier to work in that environment. It's more fun to work in that environment. There's cool projects that come up. As you talk about risk aversity, there's much greater willingness to innovate and try creative solutions if your machine is working together. And you can all of a sudden take the quiet person that hasn't said poop in 10 years, right? And pop up with this idea that's like, oh my God, that'll fix this way better than the solution we've been working on for 2 months.
Right.
So there's this wonderful openness, but it's not going to happen if the whole tribe doesn't start to evolve together. And does it matter what generation they are? It doesn't. Does it matter what personality preferences they have? It really doesn't, because I've been teaching personality stuff, Myers-Briggs, DISC for decades, and all people really want to have happen is to have their viewpoint considered and valued.
One of the things that you're talking about is about trust, respect, and dignity. It seems like that's a safe container that we want to create for any organization. And so is it really, when you're looking at the values, is it the organizational values that will create that? Is it really just about how we treat each other, or is it something bigger or broader than that when you talk about values?
It's a great question, and really the lever again, though we're really trying to improve the quality of interactions in the workplace, that's pretty broad, right? And probably somewhat complex. And so this goes back to my 1970s values clarification classes, not only getting into those, but teaching
Right.
those. And it's let's get to the simplest way that we can guarantee people will at least be civil to each other. And so by getting to those behaviors that are, boy, if we think about, remember the book, all we ever really needed to know was we learned in kindergarten. It's
Right.
some of these same kind of basic socialization rules, and that if we can get to people being nicer, consistent, really now you're gonna ring. So we got the phone ring. Let's see.
Okay, 52.
Oh, good. We'll let it ring for a little bit because
Okay. Yeah, don't worry about it.
it's research,
Okay,
and
good.
of course, whatever. So it'll usually go four times and stop.
Okay.
Here we
Okay,
go.
but what you're saying, okay, go ahead. If you can really get
So
to, yeah, okay, go ahead.
if you can really get to the core of how people deserve to be treated, and it's kind of that golden rule thing, well then let's get to the simplest way of basically not having to change people's hearts, not having to change people's personalities, not having to change kind of their philosophy or worldview, but let's just get to some behaviors, a small set, a very stable set that we can ensure that people at least treat each other civilly, that can open the door for teamwork, it can open the door for creativity, and it can open the door for much, much more, God forbid, fun in the workplace. And so are there benefits? We've seen some really cool stuff come out where healthcare costs went down.
Mm-hmm.
People's stress was reported as being less.
Wow.
There was greater interactions with, we're going to try different ethnic meals in the lunchroom every week.
Wow.
And people got totally into it. And those are things that are very peripheral to that one-on-one conversation, but that had never happened if there wasn't that almost foundation of willingness and respect and cooperation.
Yeah, okay, so here's the thing that I'm curious about. So what I was getting at is that, so there may be a value. So if I'm a high tech company, my value may be innovation. That has nothing to
Mhm.
do with trust, respect, and dignity. So you have values that are kind of business values, or maybe it does. Am I missing something?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a great question because most, boy, when I work with the high tech startups and even well established high tech, they say we want a culture of innovation. It's like, well, then tell me what you recognize and reward. Well, we recognize reward not making mistakes.
Right.
We recognize and reward not losing money. And it's so what you need to do is a skunk works over here that screws around, right? And wastes all kinds of money, but continues to deliver marketable, brandable solutions that'll all of a sudden make money. It's kind of the 3M approach
Mm-hmm.
where, yes, we know the story about the Post-its, but one of the very interesting things about 3M is they make a rule from a performance side, not a value side, that they want 30% of their revenues every year from products that are less than 3 years old.
Hmm.
Now, if you want to craft innovation as part of your actual operating norms, then that's the kind of rule you have to have. You have to actually let people play, let
Mm-hmm.
people experiment, let
Mm-hmm.
people blow crap up.
Right.
And if you're so risk averse that that experimentation can't happen, you'll never get that.
Okay, got it. So it's not necessarily just about trust, respect, and dignity. There are other values in addition to that. Because I could see you could have like 6 or 10 values about trust, respect, and dignity, but there's also the promise of what your products are going to offer. And so
Exactly.
what you're talking about, even with those, you're saying like innovation is an example of that, that it has to be specifically measurable. Like 30% of our revenues are going to be for early starter and kind of products. And so
Exactly.
so you're not proposing, I was just unclear because it seemed like you're saying only focus on those values that relate to how we all work together. These are values that also are about the products that we create and what we represent. as well.
It is, and yet, what is interesting is that people, and again, if we go back to the example of how do you get the quiet person who's got a great solution in mind, and have them feel willing to risk.
Hmm.
Got this idea,
Right.
and the only way that those brilliant ideas can all get heard and all get listened to and considered is if people feel trusted, honored, and respected. So it's
Ah,
interesting because if I don't feel like my ideas are valued, I'm not going to give you any solutions. I may be thinking of them, but I'm not going to share them because I'm going to get slapped down. I'm going to get ridiculed. So it's very interesting. And what is fascinating with us humans is we see stuff all the time that could be done differently or better.
hmm.
But if our leaders, if our peers don't enable us to say, I think we could fix that and save X amount of dollars.
Ah,
If there's not that open door for that, improvements don't happen, efficiencies don't happen, stupid stuff continues to happen.
right. Got it. Well, okay, I love it. So we've actually just hit the tip of the iceberg. A lot of this isn't here. As you mentioned, at the Culture Engine, we've been talking to Chris Edmonds there. And tell us your website too if people want to actually buy the book or have you come over and help them
Absolutely.
out.
Would love to have people talk about that and engage with me on that. The website is drivingresultsthroughculture.com. I've got video casts, blogs, podcasts, books available, my consulting and training services. It's all available right there.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. That was fantastic.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show and would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.